Hey guys, it's Ginny Silver, and today I'm talking with Asaf Liktosh from Pershing Square Law Firm. Asaf, can you let me know, just in short, what your company does, what your law firm offers, and who you work with?
Well, we are California's only EDD law firm. We deal with pretty much anything that has to do with the EDD, but primarily we represent individuals in appealing denied EDD benefits. I think it's important to point out that, while I am an attorney and I work with a law firm that represents individuals who have issues with the EDD, nothing that's being said here is being said as a legal advice. What this is for is really to educate the public and provide information from my own experiences to help people understand their situation, assess their situation, and really just educate themselves about what their claims, what could be wrong with their claims and how they can get to receiving their unemployment benefits faster. The pandemic has been very transformational, I think, for everyone, us included, because it's really changing the landscape of something that was very stale for decades, California's benefit system. And I think it's a traumatic experience for everybody, the claimants, the system, everyone that's involved. But I think we're starting to see something better emerge out of this ultimately. And I think big picture, obviously, for people who are watching this and have a claim, they're still suffering through going through the transition. But I think ultimately the system will emerge better out of this. So I think it's been a long time.
There's some claimants that may be able to seek out legal action for their issues, their problems that they're seeing, in hopes of getting some sort of resolution. And then there's some claimants that unfortunately won't be able to seek out legal action because it may not actually be something that can be solved with legal action. Can you describe to me what types of claimants you are able to help and what types of problems can actually have the potential to be resolved through legal action?
Right. So I think to understand what is appealable, people first have to understand a little bit about the appeal process. The appeal process doesn't happen inside the EDD. When you file an appeal, the appeal is transmitted from the EDD to a separate agency called the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. This is an agency which is like a judicial agency. They have administrative law judges who would review your case from scratch and figure out whether the EDD was incorrect in its determination. And in order for these judges to have jurisdiction over your case, there must be a basis, a legal basis for your appeal. And the legal basis is what's called an appealable document. Appealable documents are pretty much all the determinations that the EDD issues throughout the life of your case. If they determine that you do not qualify for benefits, that is an appealable document. And also your notice of benefit award, that is also an appealable document. So what's important to remember is anything that you disagree with inside an EDD determination is appealable. So for example, I think right now what people are seeing is a lot of procedural denials, right? For ID, for lateness, for human errors in their application. And they get this letter in the mail that says, usually in the second paragraph, they tell you you don't qualify for the following reason. And they provide some code section, which they don't really explain what it is, but they just provide a code section. And usually that is the legal basis of your denial of your benefits, and you can appeal that. Alternatively, you have when you file a claim, you get this letter that's called a Notice of Unemployment Insurance Award or Pandemic Unemployment Insurance Award. And it specifies all the details of your claim. It says when your claim begins. It says how much you're supposed to receive every week. It says what the maximum amount of benefits you can collect. And if you disagree with any one of those things, you could appeal that document. It would give the judge jurisdiction to review the decision if you think that the computation is too low, if you think that the effective date of the claim should be earlier. Any one of those things, it's appealable, and a judge would have jurisdiction if you file an appeal within 30 days of that document. Other types of disqualifications could be issues of eligibility, for example. If, for example, you file a claim and you see a $0 computation, that could mean that you cannot establish a claim because you just don't have enough wages. I know that there's PUA and that's kind of a different standard, but if you are filing a regular claim for unemployment and you don't qualify for PUA for whatever reason, you can only establish a claim if you have sufficient wages in your base period. So that would be something that doesn't meet your eligibility requirement. Alternatively, you could be filing for the wrong program. Some people file for PUA when they should be filing for UI, or vice versa. And what we've seen before the pandemic, and I think we're going to start seeing more increasingly as all the procedural issues start to clear out from the system, is people get disqualified when the circumstances in which they became unemployed, the EDD make them unqualified. So unemployment is really for people who are unemployed through no fault of their own. So if the EDD feels that you had a choice of remaining employed and you chose to become unemployed, they may find you disqualified. The one last thing that I think is notable, and maybe we're going to see a lot more of it in coming weeks and months, is overpayments. Really, that's a big issue. Overpayments. People may get all these notifications from the EDD telling them that they actually owe the EDD money, that the money that was paid to them was not supposed to be paid to them. Some people may even be, according to all the statistics we've seen, wrongfully accused of having made a willful false statement and be requested to pay not only the money that was paid to them, which could amount to tens of thousands of dollars, but also a 30% penalty and suffer all sorts of other penalties as a result of finding a false statement. So these are, serious encroachments on your rights, which are definitely appealable. So all these things we handle. Of course, this is kind of like a narrow description of the universe of possibilities, because all of this is governed by the unemployment insurance code and other codes that are ancillary to it. And so it's kind of a complicated world, when you start to dive into it, which is why I think not in every circumstance, but certainly in some circumstances, people, I think, could benefit from representation, which is the basis of our entire practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a lot to unpack there with all of that. So I want to get into each separate piece as well in more detail. Specifically, though, I have a question for you. One thing I didn't notice that you included in who you actually could help to file with legal action would be those who have suffered some sort of a loss due to not receiving payment due to pending payments, claimants who are awaiting benefits kind of during that time period, because a lot of claimants, what they're experiencing right now is due to being pending for a wide variety of reasons. They are stuck in limbo, not receiving their benefits. Meanwhile, they have done everything on their part. They have provided all the documents requested, complied with everything. They are owed those benefits, but because they're pending and not receiving them for several months, they are in the interim accruing interest, late fees, some are getting evicted, things like that. So what I missed from your statement was, do you ever represent anyone who is trying to seek legal action on not obtaining benefits in a timely manner and the damages that are associated from that? I'm curious if you ever represent any claimants in that matter.
We certainly have people who are having these issues, but we don't represent them, and we do not take on cases where the issue is basically an EDD breakdown. Okay, what you described is not a legal issue. This is what people who experience this are going through, is basically a failure or a breakdown of the system that is unable to serve them given the reality that it found itself in, and it found itself very unprepared. And I can tell you, I said in the beginning of our conversation that, I'm in touch with people, in the system, and not just EDD, but also the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. And I found that there's a lot of sincerity in trying to fix this, and they've made some significant strides towards fixing this, but there is still a very long way to go. And I think that at the end of the day, for the people who are listening, it doesn't really matter. They don't really care what the system's going to look like in the next 5 years, 2 years, 3 years. They want to know, because we have clients who've been waiting for benefits since the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Who've been waiting for over a year. And, unfortunately, this goes much farther beyond a legal issue or an appeal or a lawsuit or anything of that sort. It's a political problem, really, because it's about fixing the system so that it's able to serve people in a streamlined and effective manner in all situations, even during a global pandemic.
Now, many of my subscribers who are claimants are asking about if there is a possibility for some form of a class action suit surrounding a collective issue that they're having with the EDD. We've seen this in the Bank of America frozen debit card issues. We've seen, I believe there are two big class action lawsuits that are currently making news with regards to that. Have you had, or do you anticipate, or is it even a possibility for claimants who have the same set of issues with the EDD to pursue a class action lawsuit?
Well, I was never involved in a class action lawsuit. With that caveat, my feeling is the answer is probably no, for several reasons. Number one, you have to remember what I just said about promptly. Promptly, which is what the EDD is required to, means as soon as possible. And if they have no possibility, despite everyone's, I'm sure that if the EDD's director could snap her fingers and make things all right again, she would have, but she can't. And so it wasn't possible. And that's the reason that a lot of you out there are suffering damages. It's a systemic failure, not a personal failure, and not the fact that EDD was intentionally negligent at the moment that you were supposed to be paid. And then the other thing is, government agencies have immunity from civil liability unless they waive that immunity. So I don't really deal with suing government agencies. I just happen to know that's a fact, that there's government immunity from civil liability. That's something you want to consider if you ever decide to dabble in class action lawsuits. Bank of America is not a government agency, and they also have legal. They're regulated, both on the federal and the state level in a very heavy manner as a financial institution. So I think in a way, between suing the EDD and Bank of America, they're probably the easier target. And that's probably why they're having a class action and the EDD isn't. But with all that in mind, I think that ultimately the solution is only political. It's only about making the governor, whoever that person ends up being, talk and make comments and get into the nitty-gritty details of California's benefit system. They need to know that they might not get elected if they don't care about this issue. And that's the only way, in my opinion, in a democracy like ours, to effectuate that kind of change. A broken government can only be fixed by the government, and the government is chosen by the people. So it's ultimately our responsibility to make it known that this is a priority that needs to be taken seriously.
Can you talk a little bit about how the government agencies have immunity? Those who maybe sought out class action against Bank of America were able to do so because it's not a government agency. Is there any sort of point at which individuals, civilians, have suffered damages to a certain point that they could potentially seek out any form of action or rectification for those issues through legal action of a government entity, or is it completely protected?
Keep in mind, this is not my practice. I'm not speaking out of experience, having litigated those kind of cases. I happen to know some information from, my education, and I've dealt with, cases that were somehow connected with government. So I had some, nominal interaction with that. There are ways to sue, not to sue, but to ask for a review through administrative mandate, where you ask a higher court to review decisions of lower courts or lower agencies. But that's not the same as what we're talking about. We're talking about actually collecting damages for the failure of the government to perform its function.
So essentially, as it currently stands, no one would be able to take legal action on that aspect. We would need to see change and reform in the form of EDD reform bills introduced from the California state legislature, essentially.
Well, I think the eyes should be directed first and foremost towards the office of the governor, because the governor, so the way it's structured is the EDD is part of the California Department of Labor, and so is the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. And the person who's in charge over the Department of Labor is the governor. So the buck really stops with him. So if anyone watching this ever wants to see a California benefit system that knows how to serve them at their hour of need, they have to press of politicians, primarily the governor, that this is something that they start paying attention to, that this is something they begin to care about, because when they ignore it for decades, as they have, and this is not just the current governor, this is the previous one, Jerry Brown as well. We had a 2008 recession, and there was an audit back then, just like this time around, and there were conclusions that were not properly or fully implemented. And we find ourselves in the situation that we're in today, where everyone involved should have known that this was going to happen. So this must never happen again, because when you wait for too long and you need the system to work for you and it starts to break down, it's just going to be too late. And people who become homeless, and shouldn't have become homeless, or people who lose their car, their livelihood, their everything, and they can't keep themselves above water, they find themselves in this situation where that was completely avoidable. So this is a political issue, and I really hope, and I can tell you that there's a wave of legislation that's coming from different legislators to try to fix some of this, but it's going to get passed, right? And this is a common sense legislation that's supposed to get money faster into people's pockets. Why on earth does there have to be a middleman like Bank of America, a company that does not provide proper customer service, does not defend the money and the privacy of the claimants in an effective manner, which is why now they're suffering a class action, rightfully so in my estimation. Why do we need this middleman? Let's cut the middleman. Also, it costs the state a lot of money to pay Bank of America for this unnecessary service. Direct deposit.
The Bank of America issue is a huge problem. It's affected there are many huge problems that have affected my subscribers, but the Bank of America frozen payments is just something else. It's so sad how many of my claimants had such a large amount of money frozen, unaccessible to them, that has resulted in life-changing consequences for them. It's very difficult for so many. So do claimants of the EDD have a Bill of Rights? Is there some sort of a document that they can reference to see their rights as an unemployment claimant?
Right. So there is no claimant Bill of Rights as of yet. It's something that is actually was proposed as part of the new laws that are coming in, and I feel fairly confident that it will pass. Along with two other things that are coming to support the Bill of Rights, right? Having a Bill of Rights is not enough. You have to enforce it. Mm-hmm. And I understand that there are two things that are coming. I wrote it for myself here. It's AB 400 and AB 402. AB stands for Assembly Bill. So the first one is the Unemployment Insurance Oversight Advisory Board, which I think is a wonderful idea that is long overdue. And then the second thing is the Office of the Claimant Advocate, which is basically a place inside the EDD that will actually have the claimant's interests in mind and be able to promote claimant's interests, throughout their claims and resolve simple issues through, simple telephone calls. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if this idea, although it's a good idea and a noble idea, because we really need that. I don't know how successful that's going to be, because it really depends on the EDD's ability to take calls, which they've not been able to do, efficiently so far. Yeah. So that remains to be seen. But an oversight board, something that actually has teeth. I want to say something really interesting in that regard. I was listening to, the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board has a monthly meeting. Very interesting for EDD nerds, for me, like me to watch. And they go over, the different things and trends and changes that are happening in their system. One of the things that came up is, they're saying that it takes 8 weeks for the EDD to process an appeal. So imagine, if you receive a disqualification letter, this is the process you have to go through. You have to wait 8 weeks for the EDD to actually transmit the appeal from them to the appeals board. Then the appeals board, which is already flooded with appeals, has to find a time for a hearing, which will take weeks. Okay?
8 weeks to transmit?
Just to transmit.
Just to transmit is 8 weeks. Wow.
It's complete idle time. So a lot of things could happen in those 8 weeks that would promote your case, and you wouldn't have to wait as long. And then after a decision is made, it takes time for the EDD to implement that as well, and you may be subject to an additional review. So the discussion was, how can we narrow that time frame of the 8 weeks? Is there anything we can do? So they discussed possibly having people file appeals directly with the appeals board instead of filing them with the EDD. That required some change in the regulations, because the regulations say you have to file it with the department, the EDD, not with the appeals board. So the chair of the board of appeals, Marty Block, asked their attorney what happens if, the EDD is supposed to transfer quickly, promptly, according to the law. What happens if they don't transfer promptly? Is there anything they can do to penalize the EDD? And the answer was no, they can't do anything to penalize the EDD. And I think that's quintessentially why we're here, because, there is no price for, inefficacy. There is no price to be paid for, bad results. And, the idea of having an oversight advisory board is good as long as it's going to have teeth, as long as it's going to be something that it's actually can levy some kind of a penalty or punishment or whatever you want to call it to make the EDD, perform the way they're supposed to perform. That's something we're looking forward to, and hopefully we're moving away from the reality of the claimant not having Bill of Rights. One more thing I want to say about this: the fact that there's no claimant Bill of Rights doesn't mean you don't have any rights. You do have rights, but the rights are statutory and they are constitutional. So, for example, the Unemployment Insurance Code Section 1326 says that you have to be paid, quote, promptly. Promptly usually means as soon as possible. Problem with that is that what's possible changes when you have a global pandemic. And so, the EDD is not violating this law. They're paying you promptly as possible as they're able to. The other thing is you have a right to file an appeal, right? That's something nobody can take away from you. You have a right to a fair hearing. You have the right to an attorney. These are basic constitutional rights of due process that everybody deserves, irrespective of the Bill of Rights. I think the Bill of Rights is more about a culture of service than it is about, just having the right to be heard. And I hope that's where the EDD is moving.
Now, along those lines of thinking carefully about how you answer those important documents that make those important changes to your claim that could result in overpayments or you not being able to receive benefits in the future due to an error, who would you recommend that claimants seek out to ask these questions to? Obviously, I have a YouTube channel where I compile government documents and share information, but I do clearly state that I'm a random person on the internet and that you should essentially view my channel only as compiling resources and take into account that I'm not a professional with the EDD. They definitely shouldn't be using me as their only source of evaluating these statements, but who can claimants seek out if they do want to get these questions answered and they can't get through to customer service? Do you have any recommendations there?
That's a really good point, because a lot of people have things that are not that cookie cutter and simple. And a lot of people end up going and doing research on their own on the EDD website, which is, filled with information. It's not, they have a website that has a lot of information, but you have to really spend the time to understand your situation, and you don't want to miss anything. And that's really why my company exists. It exists to serve people, to bridge the gap the EDD has neglected, to bridge. And everyone who calls my company gets a free consultation. Anybody who's interested in a free consultation gets one. And, even if it's not a case that we can help you with, we at least try to do our best to send you down the right path or give you some answers of clarity about what you're going through. We try to, at least shed some light so you're not going on a wild goose chase, doing something on your own, even if we can't help you. And if we can help you, all the more so, we would offer to take your case, and we, take cases in a way that is, no money up front or anything like that. So it's very convenient, and it's very risk-free for people to do. And so, I'm very proud to say, we've worked really hard on building this business in very difficult conditions, because, it's really a desert, of customer service. People aren't here, and they're not really interested in the unemployed. Not to, toot my own horn or whatever, however you say that, I am very proud of what we built. We have some really serious people here who can answer a lot of your questions and help out with figuring out what's the path forward for you and your claim.
Your company, you mentioned that there's no upfront fee. How do you typically, I know each case is going to be different, but if a claimant is wondering if it is even a possibility for them to seek out your services, what kind of fees should they anticipate?
Well, it really depends on the complexity of your case, but we only take flat fees. We don't like take a percentage or anything like that, and we only recover the fees if we are successful in, reversing disqualifications, and eventually we get paid your benefits. So it's really designed to be something that is, approachable and reasonable in terms of the fee, I guess, it can range depending on the complexity of your case, somewhere between, 1,000, 1,500 flat fee whenever we complete your case.
All right. Well, thank you so much for answering so many of those questions. I really appreciate your time. Can you just real quick give us a quick recap of where claimants can locate you if they're interested in obtaining more information about your services and your firm?
So the best place to reach us is on our website, www.pershingsquarelaw.com. And we have chat, phone, pretty much a bunch of ways to get a hold of us. So, we're available normal business hours, Monday through Friday.
Well, thank you so much. Okay, you guys, before I close out this video, I want to do one thing for my viewers. I know that many of you are watching this video because you are suffering extreme financial hardship. The EDD may not have been paying you for months. You might be stuck in pending. You might be awaiting an extension. There's a lot of problems going on right now with you guys receiving your benefits. So I want to funnel back in some of my YouTube earnings back into the community. So I'm going to be giving away $100 to 20 of my viewers. I'm asking that please only enter if you're suffering severe hardship, and the small amount of $100 would truly make a difference for you to get some sort of an essential need. So please only reply to this if you are someone suffering extreme financial hardship, and this would really help you in a small way. Now I'm only going to be accepting entries until tonight, 4/28 at 10 p.m. After 4/28 at 10 p.m., you may no longer enter for this, so please don't comment after that time. Now, only enter if you're suffering severe hardship, and this would help. You are going to comment on the top pinned comment in order to enter. At the top of the comments list, you will see one comment from me, noted in that comment as being the place to leave your entries. Please only place your entry in this pinned comment and not in the main comments. You are going to comment with your PayPal email. I will be sending out direct payments using PayPal only, so leave your PayPal email address there. Only enter once. Multiple entries will be disqualified. Now, please know that leaving your email address in a public place opens you up to anyone emailing you. Please know that I will be deleting the pinned comment with the entries at 10 p.m. for viewer safety, but I do want you guys to be very clear. I will not be emailing you. I will not be contacting you in any way. If you are selected, you will simply receive $100 sent over through PayPal automatically. I will not reach out to you. I will not ask you to send me personal information in any way. So if you are contacted by someone saying that they are me, please know that that is not me. I'll delete that pinned comment once 10 p.m. comes around for viewer safety. Okay, you guys, I hope that was helpful. Please click like, subscribe, and leave me a comment down below.